I came just to discuss this issue with you. I mean, there's a reason it's called permafrost. Since it's frozen in place, we would really benefit from at least 4 hours of temperatures over 35. Warm weather is what we need. The Yukon had written off a collapsed mine as a merciless death trap, and Parker Schnabel bet his entire business on it. A location frozen solid and haunted by past failures. They called the Widow's Cut. Parker used a lidar system, a covert weapon that could see through the earth itself, to break it. It brought him a $75 million discovery that would establish him as the unchallenged king of the Klondike and a forgotten shaft. This amazing technology, however, also revealed a century-old secret that would cost him more than his gold. Nobody dared to touch the earth. To begin with, a heavy layer of permafrost covered the entire region. We're not referring to a small amount of frozen earth here. For thousands and thousands of years, this dirt has been frozen solid, as hard as concrete. Take a moment to consider that. That ground's stability and pressure are entirely erratic. It takes a tremendous amount of work to simply break through it. For comparison, compared to conventional earth moving, permafrost excavation can result in twice as much wear and tear on heavy equipment and up to 40% greater fuel use. There was always a scary risk that anything or everyone below may be crushed in an instant by multi-ton pieces of rock and frozen dirt that could suddenly break away during any digging operation. We want to be slew. Thus, it's not nice to run into permafrost here. Sending Big Red the pay is our only option. Let's pray it thaws before Big Red pulls a pig. If that wasn't enough to deter miners, the constant threat of a devastating flood was another. You see, there are frequently subsurface springs, or pockets of unfrozen water concealed within and beneath the permafrost. One of these pockets might be punctured by a small temperature change, or an excavator vibration, quickly transforming the mine shaft into a watery death. It might destroy heavy equipment worth millions of dollars and bring a whole business to a complete stop. It was a place where a single mistake might ruin your career, not just your season. However, Parker Schnabel noticed something that no one else did. When you think about it, it's humorous. The majority of miners saw a money pit and an inevitable failure when they looked at the Widow's Cut. Parker recognized the greatest opportunity of his life as he looked at it. He's just wired that way. Parker has always been a gambler at heart, having learned from his renowned grandfather, John Schnabel, since he was a young boy. He has consistently pushed for greater ambitions, more land, and more riches than anyone believed was feasible. Parker mixes that Klondike grit with a dogged youthful ambition and a startling embrace of new electronics. While competitors like Tony Beats may rely on decades of raw power and old-school knowledge, he had more in mind than simply having a successful season. He had an incredible 7,000-ounce target in mind. At today's pricing, that amounts to more than $128 million. A score like that would solidify his position as the Klondike's uncontested ruler. Yes, I believe that starting a plant and slicing a bunch of tailings to check whether anything is there is the only way we can sort of get over this obstacle. Parker, therefore, didn't see the Widow's Cut a location that everyone fears as a warning indicator. In actuality, it was an open invitation. He reasoned that whatever gold was buried there was his to take if no one else had the courage to do it. Betting his entire business on a geological death trap was a huge, high-stakes gamble. The old-timers could never have imagined the secret weapon Parker had up his sleeve. Eyes in the sky. Parker chose to fight smarter rather than harder when faced with an obstacle that appeared insurmountable. He brought in the heavy guns, high-tech eyes in the sky, rather than using dozers and excavators to fight the permafrost, a battle he would probably lose. Parker and his team launched a cutting-edge lidar system, a technological advancement that is radically changing the mining industry, as well as other sectors like forestry and archaeology. 10 years ago, this type of technology was mostly used by government and military organizations. You see, light detection and ranging is what lidar stands for, and it does tasks that are nearly magical. Millions of laser pulses are fired at the ground per second by a device that is frequently mounted to a drone. These pulses provide a very comprehensive three-dimensional image of the landscape by precisely calculating the distance after bouncing off the surface and returning to a sensor. We are discussing precision to within a few centimeters. By carefully flying back and forth over every inch of the intimidating terrain, they combined this laser technology with sophisticated drone mapping. That's Gold Run, a very wealthy brook. And I suppose it was just here in this place where it poured into Dominion. I believe that the tailings will contain a significant amount of gold. Their superpower came from this combo. In a manner that was previously inconceivable, they were able to map out the actual contours of the Earth by efficiently seeing through the dense undergrowth, the heavy trees, and even layers of loose soil. It was a huge edge that changed the game. Other crews were forced to make educated guesses, drill blind test holes, and hope for the best. A flawless computer model of the Widow's Cut was being constructed by Parker's team. They were searching for more than simply gold. They were searching for a vulnerability, a secret route, or a way to open the treasure trove that had been sealed for many centuries. They discovered something incredible that had been lost for decades. As the data began to flood in, and the 3D model began to take shape on their computer screens, the lasers produced an astonishing advance. The LAR map showed a perfectly straight man-made anomaly that had been hidden beneath a century of wilderness and trash. Invisible to the unaided eye, it was a collapsed vertical shaft, a forgotten remnant of the original early 20th century mining operation. It was more than 40 meters deep, according to their exact measurements. That is a straight drop of over 130 feet into the blackness. It was this. This was their covert entryway. They could have used this existing shaft rather than attempting to dig a whole new ramp down into the mine, which would have required a time-consuming, expensive, and hazardous battle against the permafrost. The plan was clever, yet terrible. To support the old shaft's collapsing walls, the crew set to work right once, bringing in enormous reinforced steel beams. The labor was nerve-wracking and slow, a continual reminder of what may go wrong. Every scrape of the excavator's bucket on the rock reverberated in the perilous calm. However, they succeeded in creating a sufficiently secure route down into the center of the mine, with Parker's knowledgeable team in the forefront. By the factory, I saw some frozen pay chunks. Tyson and Justin seemed to be struggling greatly with frozen material. There will inevitably be problems, because it has been a very cold spring. They finally had a direct line to the prize after weeks of frustration and weather-related battles. However, nobody was ready for what awaited them at the bottom, not even Parker, in his wildest thoughts. The ransom of the Monarch. The crew knew they had struck the mother lode. As soon as their equipment reached the bottom of that stabilized shaft, what they discovered was simply amazing. It was more than merely perarded with gold flakes mingled in. It was an unspoiled vein of gold and quartz that gleamed brilliantly in their lights. This is legendary stuff. Discovering a high-yield quartz vein is similar to discovering the gold deposit's artery, or direct source, as opposed to merely the dispersed dust that has been washed away from it over thousands of years. Parker's on-site geologist declared it to be the richest and purest natural deposit he had ever seen in his career, because it was so immaculate and pure. There was no time to waste at all. The group was aware that rumors of such a significant discovery might draw claim jumpers or unwelcome attention from competitors in the close-knit Klondike community. They so began working with a furious, frantic attitude. Driven by pure adrenaline and the captivating sight of all that gold, they worked around the clock, every day of the week. This is where things start to get very crazy. After 3 days of tireless work, they were able to recover over 4,000 ounces of gold in under 72 hours. They calculated that the value of just one cleanup was more than $10 million. In one amazing weekend, the season-saving haul paid for their gasoline, salaries, and enormous running expenses. To disclose this ground, we must act as quickly as possible. This is what will be required. We simply don't have enough ground to cover. Therefore, everyone needs to stand up. This amazing score was only a small sample of the real treasure that was hidden further inside the soil. But the gamble had paid off handsomely. It was a game-changer, that $10 million shawl. The geologist on the team, however, had even more startling news. He discovered that the enormous quartz vein was much bigger than anyone had anticipated after studying its geology. It was not limited to their small room. It went deeper beneath the surface, much farther. The scientists quickly calculated that the vein extended for another 2 km, based on its thickness, observed richness, and estimated length from geological surveys. It's roughly 1¼ miles. The numbers really start to go crazy at this point. They ran the figures on the entire 2-kilometer vein, taking into consideration the extraordinarily rich gold that they had already extracted. The potential worth was enormous. $75 million more. This season would be more than just a success if they could manage it. It would be the most prosperous mining operation in the gold rush show's history. It was the sort of discovery that miners fantasize about all their lives but never achieve. However, Parker realized that his greatest battle was only getting started after making such a significant discovery. A $75 million secret cannot be kept in the Klondike. The news of Parker's attack on the Widow's Cut quickly spread like wildfire around the gold fields. All of a sudden, there was conversation. What Parker had discovered had rival miners, interested residents, and even government inspectors talking. There was pressure. However, the gold rush also brought with it a wave of deceit, greed, and treachery. When legends are false, the controversy started just as the assay report's ink had barely dried. It began as rumors in Dawson City saloons and progressed to social media posts that went viral. The assertion that Parker had received a life sentence for environmental offenses was among the most ludicrous. A total fabrication, a work of digital fiction that was probably created by a rival who was envious. But a lie can cause more harm than a damaged dozer in the fiercely competitive industry of gold mining. Your blood and veins are affected by this gold mining. Parker was unprepared for this new kind of warfare, which required him to spend valuable time and money on public relations and attorneys as a result of the rumor. The attacks become increasingly complex. A lawsuit was brought by a sham company connected to a dubious global consortium contesting the validity of his Widow's Cut claim. They appeared to have a valid claim to the land based on a number of masterfully falsified documents, dating back a century. Parker, who had always resolved conflicts with a screaming battle or a handshake, was suddenly caught up in a maze of legal wrangling that was threatening to drain him of all his resources. His competitors started to circle after spotting a moment of weakness. In particular, Tony Beets appeared to enjoy Parker's situation, patronizingly advising Parker in public, while subtly stoking the legal dispute behind the scenes. Everyone on Parker's group was beginning to crumble under the pressure. What ought to have been a time for joy has become a raging furnace of strife. Disputes arose over who should receive the largest bonus. Suspicion and anger took the place of the casual friendliness. Unaccustomed to having so much money, several crew members began to party hard in town, which resulted in humiliating stories about fights in bars and cars that crashed. Although Parker had traditionally taken the lead, he was now more interested in fighting fires than in prospecting for gold. His hitherto devoted workforce was gradually disintegrating, as each member was preoccupied with their own possible salary. Doesn't it make you wonder? It sounds like a fairy tale when we see these enormous figures on a screen. $75 million. All of your issues seem to have been permanently resolved. That doesn't appear to want to surface. Whoa. What on earth? However, this is frequently not the case in practice. It's simple to believe that such a discovery occurs suddenly. A straightforward instance of timing and location. The years of danger, the crippling debt, and the constant strain that culminate in that one fortunate moment, however, are hidden from view. Could the $75 million jackpot story be more complicated than it first appears? Are we overlooking something important when a narrative seems so flawless and unbelievable? In actuality, the simple part was locating the treasure. Surviving the victory is the true test, the one that wrecks most individuals. Parker Schnabel made a king's ransom out of an impossibly difficult mine. But did the wealth bring about a curse, or did it turn him into a legend? Tell us in the comments section.